We thought we were buying an abandoned farmhouse, a forgotten place beside a quiet canal, a simple renovation project. We were wrong. 90 days later, more than 30 complete strangers would change our lives forever. A retired carpenter, a local historian, a schoolteacher, and an entire village that refused to let this little house disappear. Because this was never really about restoring a building. It was about discovering the hidden heroes who reminded us that kindness still exists. This is it, home, or what was left of it anyway. When we first saw it, it was hard to look past, well, everything. The roof was more moss than slate. The windows were just vacant holes staring out at a canal that had all but been forgotten. And the silence? It was this heavy, damp silence that felt like it had soaked right into the bricks. We're Alex and Sarah, and for years, we'd been dreaming of finding a place with a story. We weren't looking for perfect. We were looking for purpose. And this place, a canal farmhouse from the 1970s, had spades of it. The 72nds were a weird turning point for canals in Britain. After getting beaten down by roads and rail for decades, people were just starting to see them as places for leisure, for fun. This house was born right in that moment. It wasn't some ancient manor. It was a home for working people, a piece of a more recent, industrial past that was just as much at risk of being wiped away. We could see it, we could picture bringing it all back. Not just fixing the house, but making it a home that remembered where it came from. We imagined mornings with coffee, watching narrowboats drift by, the garden finally cleared and alive again. We saw ourselves as caretakers of this humble little piece of canal heritage. The romance of it all was intoxicating. The reality, though, was a very, very cold shower waiting to happen. That first walkthrough was a masterclass in wishful thinking. We stepped through what was left of the front door, and the smell hit us first. The smell of time and neglect. A thick, earthy mix of damp plaster, rotting wood, and dust that had been settling for decades. Every single floorboard groaned under our feet, like the house itself was complaining. The living room was ground zero for the decay. Water had snaked its way in through the ceiling, leaving this grotesque map-like stain across the plaster. The wallpaper, a faded 72nds floral pattern, was peeling off in long curls, showing the dark, damp brick underneath. And in the corner, a whole colony of mushrooms was happily growing. It was almost impressive, in the most horrifying way. We tried to laugh it off. "Bit of a fixer-upper," Alex said, his voice echoing a little. The joke fell flat. We went to the kitchen. The linoleum on the floor was a cracked mess. The cabinets were barely hanging on the walls, their doors all crooked. A single, rusty tap dripped a steady, maddening rhythm into a stained sink. This was where a family would have gathered. Now it was just a ghost of a room. Up the rickety stairs, the bedrooms told the same story. Water damage and decay everywhere. In one room, part of the floor was so soft, it felt like a sponge. In another, the window frame had rotted clean through, leaving a gaping hole to the outside. From that window, we could see the canal, its surface still and green with algae. For just a second, you could get it. The view was beautiful, a slice of peace cutting through the landscape. But then your eyes would drift down to the garden, a jungle of thorns and weeds so thick you couldn't even see the ground. The house was being swallowed whole. Still, we weren't deterred. This was the dream, right? To rescue something, pour your heart into it, and watch it transform. We had spreadsheets, we had budgets, we had a boundless supply of what we now realize was pure naivety. We put in an offer, and to our complete shock, it was accepted. The abandoned canal farmhouse was ours. The first few weeks were a blur of sledgehammers, crowbars, and excitement. We started hacking our way through the garden, a brutal, sweaty fight with nature. We filled skip after skip with the debris of a forgotten life. Old furniture, soggy carpets, broken bits and pieces. We felt like we were making progress. We felt strong. No moment wasn't one big thing. It was a slow, creeping dread. It started when the structural engineer came. He was a quiet, serious guy who didn't say much. He just walked through, tapping walls, shining a flashlight into dark corners, and making notes. His silence was way more terrifying than any warning. When he finally gave us his verdict, he let out a heavy sigh. "The house is tired," he said. which we learned is engineer speak for about to fall down. That was the moment we stopped seeing a renovation project and started seeing the possibility of losing everything we'd worked for. For the first time since buying the farmhouse, neither of us knew what to say. He pointed out the bow in the main gable end wall. "That's not supposed to look like a banana," he noted dryly. He explained that years of water had weakened the mortar and the wall was in a state of near collapse. The whole roof, he told us, was shot. The main support beams, the bones of the house, were soft with rot. The damp wasn't just on the surface, it was structural. The house wasn't just wet, it was slowly turning back into dirt. His report was just one disaster after another. Significant timber decay, widespread structural instability, complete failure of the roof membrane. The cost he quoted just to make the building stable was staggering, more than we paid for the house itself. And that was the moment the dream shattered. We just sat on the overgrown lawn, report in hand, staring at the building. It wasn't a romantic project anymore. It was a monster, a money pit that was about to swallow us whole. The weight of it was crushing. We'd poured our savings into this. We'd told everyone about our grand adventure. Now we were staring down the very real possibility of total, catastrophic failure. Our nighttime conversations changed from paint colors to how do we get out of this. We felt foolish, alone, and completely, utterly overwhelmed. The house was bigger than us. The history we wanted to save was too heavy. We were drowning. Desperation is a funny thing. For weeks, we were just paralyzed. The house just sat there mocking us. Every time we looked at it, we didn't see a future home. We saw a monument to how arrogant we'd been. The low point came on a rainy Saturday. We were standing in the living room, and water was dripping from the ceiling into a bucket. Plink, plink, plink. It sounded like a countdown to bankruptcy. Alex picked up a piece of fallen plaster and just threw it against the wall. "I'm done," he said quietly. "I can't do this, we can't." It felt like surrender. We seriously talked about just selling the land at a loss to escape. But who would buy it? Who'd take on this disaster? We weren't asking anyone to save us. We had already accepted that we might fail. We just wanted someone, anyone, to remember the people who once called this place home. That night, feeling like we had nothing left to lose, Sarah sat down and wrote a post on the local village Facebook group. It wasn't really a plea for help. It was more of a confession. She wrote about our dream, the history of the little farmhouse, and the mess we'd found ourselves in. She posted the photos of the bowing wall, the rotten beams, the jungle garden. She ended it with one question. "Does anyone remember this house when it was alive? We just want to hear its stories before it's gone." We went to bed expecting a few sorry to hear that comments. We woke up to something else. The post had been shared dozens of times. There were over 100 comments. People remembered waving to the family who lived there in the 80s. Someone recalled fishing in the canal right out front as a kid. And then, different kinds of comments started appearing. "That gable end needs repointing with lime mortar, not cement. I've got some old slate tiles in my yard that might match. I'm a retired carpenter. Let me know if you need a hand looking at those beams." The next morning, a muddy Land Rover stopped outside. We had never seen the driver before, but that one visit changed the future of the farmhouse forever. An older man with leathery hands and a kind, weathered face got out. "I'm Arthur," he said, nodding toward the house. "Read your post. Used to work on the canal maintenance crews back in the day. Thought I'd have a look." Arthur was our first hidden hero, a retired craftsman who seemed to have the history of every building in the area stored in his fingertips. He walked through the house with an authority the engineer just didn't have. He wasn't scared of the rot. He just saw a problem that needed solving. "It's a mess, no doubt," he said, prodding a soft joist with a screwdriver. "But Shez got good bones under all this muck. They knew how to build, even in the 70s. Just need to give her a chance to breathe." Arthur spent 2 hours with us that day, showing us how to check the brickwork, how to tell the difference between surface, damp, and deep rot. He explained why we had to use traditional materials, not modern shortcuts that would just trap the moisture and make things worse. He spoke our language, not of budgets and failure, but of craft and respect. For the first time in months, we felt a tiny flicker of hope. He wasn't offering to fix it. He was offering to teach us. A week later, another visitor. This was Eleanor, a woman in her late 60s with bright eyes and an infectious passion for local history. She ran the Village History Society and came armed with a folder of old photos and maps. "I saw your post," she said, spreading them out on the hood of her car. "This isn't just a house. It was one of the last ones built for canal staff before they centralized everything. The man who lived here, a Mr. Henderson, was a lockkeeper for over 30 years. Suddenly, the house had a name. A real story." Eleanor showed us a grainy photo from the late 70s. The house, neat and tidy. A garden running down to the towpath. A man in overalls stood proudly by the door. "That's him," she said. "He was part of the canal's living history." Eleanor gave our project its soul back. We weren't just saving bricks. We were honoring Mr. Henderson's memory. We were connecting to a whole line of people who worked this waterway. Her contribution was just as crucial as Arthur's knowledge. She gave us our why back. The third hero arrived not with tools or photos, but with a clipboard and endless energy. His name was Ben, a local teacher who organized community events. He'd seen the Facebook thread and saw an opportunity. "This isn't just your problem," he told us, standing in our jungle of a garden. "This house is part of our village. Letting it fall down is like tearing a page out of our own story. People want to help, you just have to let them." Ben was an organizer. He proposed a community cleanup weekend. He put up flyers in the village shop, the pub, the community notice board. The response was astonishing. That Saturday morning, over 30 people showed up. Teenagers, families, retirees. They came with chainsaws, wheelbarrows, and flasks of hot tea. The energy was unbelievable. Arthur was there, directing a team clearing plants from the foundations, explaining how roots damaged the brickwork. Ben coordinated everything, turning a massive task into something manageable, almost fun. Strangers were laughing and working together, all for the same reason. Someone started a bonfire. Another group began carefully cleaning and stacking any good bricks and slates. "Waste not, want not," Arthur kept saying. "Every piece of this house has value." By the end of the weekend, the house looked totally different. It wasn't being strangled anymore. You could see its shape, you could walk around it. But the real transformation was in us. We stood there, exhausted and muddy, watching this small army of volunteers. We weren't alone anymore. This wasn't our private burden. It was a community's cause. That weekend was the turning point. Arthur started coming by 3 days a week, patiently teaching Alex the art of repointing. That slow, methodical process of replacing old mortar with a lime mix that lets the walls breathe. He taught him how to repair the original window frames, splicing in new wood with respect for the old work. Eleanor became our history consultant, helping us research everything from original paint colors to the kinds of plants a canal-side garden would have had in the 70 seconds. And Ben kept rallying support. A local roofer volunteered to help us make the roof watertight. An electrician offered to help us rewire the place to modern standards. The project had grown beyond us, in the best way possible. It was being carried on a wave of community spirit. The months that followed were just a testament to what people can do when they come together. The house, once our place of despair, became a hub of activity, a school for forgotten skills, and a center for the community. The final push was a mix of pure excitement and exhaustion. The heavy structural work was done. The banana-shaped wall was straight. The roof was sound, a beautiful patchwork of new and salvaged slate. The house was finally dry now. It was about the details that turn a shell into a home. We weren't just apprentices anymore. Arthur had taught us well. We spent weeks carefully stripping paint from the original doors, finding the solid wood beneath. We learned how to plaster, the rhythmic scrape and glide of the trowel becoming a familiar meditation. Eleanor would pop by with old photos she had found. "Oh, the Hendersons had a little rose bush right there," she'd say, pointing to a spot by the new garden wall. So, we planted a rose bush, then organized a painting party, and a dozen people showed up to help us get the first coats on, filling the house with laughter and the smell of new beginnings. The day we finished, there was no big ceremony. It was quiet. Alex and I stood in the doorway, the same one we'd first hesitated in, and just looked. The silence was different, not heavy and damp, but peaceful. The sound of a home that was breathing again. And now, we want to show you what this community built. Welcome to the finished farmhouse. Stepping inside, the first thing you notice is the light. The hallway, once a dark tunnel, is bright and welcoming. The floorboards, which we lifted, denailed, and relaid one by one, are warm under your feet. Let's go into the living room. Remember the giant water stain in the mushroom colony? Look at it now. The walls are clean and bright, in a soft heritage green that Eleanor helped us pick, and in the corner where the mushrooms were, there's now an armchair, a perfect spot for reading. The centerpiece is the fireplace. It was hidden behind plasterboard. Arthur suspected it was there, and one afternoon, a gentle tap with his hammer revealed the original brick hearth. He and Alex spent a week restoring it. It's a proud testament to the home's real history. Now, into the kitchen. This was our biggest challenge. The dripping tap and sagging cabinets are gone. In their place is a space that's both functional and full of character. We built the cabinets ourselves, a simple shaker style that felt right for a farmhouse. The countertops are solid wood, and the floor is classic quarry tile, like what would have been here originally. Standing here, you can just picture making tea and looking out the window at the canal. It's a happy room now. Let's head upstairs. The staircase doesn't groan anymore. Every step is solid. The landing, once a dark corridor, is brightened by a skylight. This was our bedroom. The floor that felt like a sponge is now solid oak. And the window, the rotted frame that left a gaping hole, was completely rebuilt by Arthur. It's a perfect replica of the original, but double-glazed and draft-free. Waking up in the morning to that view across the water. It's better than we ever dreamed. It's a constant reminder of why we started this. Every room in this house holds a story, not just of its first life, but of its rebirth. This doorknob was salvaged by a neighbor. This light fixture was donated. This garden wall was built over 2 weekends by volunteers. To celebrate, we had a small get-together in the garden. Not a party, really. A thank you. We invited everyone who had helped, from Arthur, Eleanor, and Ben, to the teenager who spent a day just hauling bricks. It was a beautiful, sunny afternoon. The garden, once a fortress of weeds, was now a simple lawn and flower beds. People walked through the house they all helped save. Seeing the pride on their faces was the best reward. Arthur stood in the living room, running his hand over the fireplace with a small, satisfied smile. Eleanor was in the garden, telling kids stories about the lockkeeper. Ben was by the canal, laughing with volunteers, pointing out where they'd pulled out a giant tree root. This project was never really about us. We were just the ones who started it. It was about a community refusing to let a piece of its history crumble. It was about the quiet generosity of people sharing their time and their skills. We set out to restore a house, but in the end, the house restored something in us. It restored our faith in people. This isn't just our home. It's a landmark to what's possible when people decide to care. It's a testament to the hidden heroes in every town just waiting for a chance to help. We thought we were saving an old farmhouse, but looking back, it wasn't the house that needed saving. It was us. This village reminded us that history isn't protected by governments. It's protected by ordinary people who refuse to let it disappear. Sometimes the greatest builders never ask for credit. They simply arrive, pick up a hammer, and quietly change someone's life forever.